Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi brachas, Perek Beis. We're going to conclude Halacha Gimel and begin Halacha Dalit. In the Oiz V'Hadar edition, we're going to Daf Chav Gimel. We left off on Daf Chav Gimel on the top. Before we go on, just to close off the sugya, the Gemara quoted here on Daf Chav Beis, Amid Beis, Elisha Balkin of Fayim. And the question that we also hopefully spoke out in Shabbos, Memtes, Shabbos Kuflamid, that first of all, why did he say that he has doves? Why wouldn't he say another bird? Aside of the fact that the Yidden are nimshalu, right? We are compared to a dove because we're loyal, etc. But the dove protects itself with its wings, not with its beak. That makes it distinct from other birds. And the mitzvahs, which will be compared to the wings, is that which affords us shmira, and particularly tefillin. And that's something that we see also that the Rebbe, before the 6-day war, began mitzvah tefillin, particularly in order to add additional protection for the Jewish people. Now, the Magen Avram writes something beautiful, that the reason why when we wrap up our tefillin, we don't wrap the tzuas on top of the bias. We wrap the tzuas on the sides of the bias proper, of the tefillin. That's all connected to the story of Elisha Balkan of Fayim. In other words, we want to give this a visual that the tefillin should look like, when it's wrapped up, like a dove with 2 wings, because it offers us shemirah. Now, we're going to start on Daf Chav Gimel, learning the sugya of whether Mesim are aware of what's happening. We're speaking, number one, are aware of what's happening, particularly around their kever. And we'll see that that is the case. And on top of that, the greater the tzaddik, the greater the awareness that God gives them of things that are happening here in this world. Now, we're going to go quoting various mamoris, various statements from the Amoira, Rabbi Idi, B'Shem Rabbi Shimon. These are all Amoiroim because it's all B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. And ultimately, we're going to get back to a little bit discussing topics that were related to the sugya of tefillin that we had. We're going to learn a little bit about the din of mukav kavil, and that is that when you write stam, sifrei Torah, tefillin, and mezuzahs, you have to make sure that every letter is fully surrounded with white parchment. What will be the halach if one letter is going to be touching another letter? We're going to learn, connected to the sugya of tefillin, ultimately, we were learning about relieving oneself in tefillin, that right? What about, can a person daven while they need to relieve themselves? That will be the final topic in Halacha Gimel. And then on Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis, we're going to start Halacha Dalet, which is the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is going to speak about 4 halachas, B'kitzur. One is whether you have to hear yourself while you are reading the Shema, Machlekes Tanoim. What's going to happen if you did not have a meticulous enunciation when you read the words of the Shema, right? Al levavecha, Esev, Mantizkiru, right? It should be with a zayin, which means in order for us to remember, not with a sin. A sin means we're doing it in order to get schar. No, we're not doing it to get schar. We'll give other examples when we go through this topic. What happens if you were not very meticulous? We're going to learn about what were to happen if you read the Shema out of the sequence, and what were to happen if you skipped the word or a pasuk of the Shema. These are the 4 topics that we're going to have in the Mishnah and Halacha Daled. And if we'll have enough time, we'll begin the Gemara of Chav Gimel Amid Beis. That's going to begin discussing regarding prayer that was said in a way that you cannot hear. The Mishnah speaks about whether you have to hear the words of the Shema, Machlekes Tanoim, and from there we're going to go to the sugya of Tefillah. Without any further ado, Daf Chav Gimel Amid Aleph. So says the Gemara, Rab Zeira b'Shem Rabbi Abba Bar Yirmiyah says. And again, all of this is behemshech to relieving oneself while wearing tefillin. In other words, there has to be a restriction. One cannot, and we learned that aside of Rabbi Yechanan, even though theoretically you are allowed to urinate in tefillin, but since a person regularly will vent air while they are even urinating, that is also usher. Okay, so now we're going to learn about other restraints. Rabbi Zeira b'Shem Rabbi Abba Bar Yirmiyah says, "Lo yikonis adon lebeis hakvaros." A person is not allowed to enter a beis hachayim v'yaset tzarachav sham and relieve oneself over there. Restrain yourself. And what's the problem with that? Because it's disrespectful. V'im asakain. So according to our pasuk in Mishlei, All of Hakasav Ayman, that Loyeg Lorosh, Rosh means someone who's poor, someone who mocks the Rosh, Cheirev Oiseu, is really blaspheming the one who made the poor. Because every person has to be respected. The fact that God made that person, so out of respect of God, respect that person. Now, this concept of Loyeg Lorosh Cheirev Oiseu, applying it to the dead because they're poor. In other words, don't do in front of them something that they are unable to do. It's like mocking them. So Dolma, this is a very important. I know we're already not saying it that much, but let's just go. There are certain words in the Yerushalmi that we have to remember what they mean. In Bavli, a very common word is itmar. But before we open up a discussion of Amoy Royim, the Gemara says itmar. Before we open up a discussion of Tanoim, it's Tan Rabbanon, right? But itmar, the way the Yerushalmi says itmar is by using the words dolma. So says the Charedim on the second line on top of the Amud. Inami k'may itmar b'Bavli. So dolma like itmar. Rabbi Ruba, Rabbi the Great. The Rabbi Yenason, Mohoy Mahalchin means they were walking. We'll see in a cemetery. Why were they walking there? Kumei Arsei, before the bier of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yosi Bar Lukunya, who was being buried. Now, this is something that regularly happens over here. What happens is when you're burying someone, it becomes very difficult not to step on the graves of others. So while that was happening, Rabbi Yonason, Mafsa al Kivrei, Rabbi Rabba was taking extraordinary precautions. And Rabbi Yonason wasn't taking that type of precaution. So he was stepping on top of the graves. So Amalei, Rabbi Ruba, Kedoin Inun Meimar. Right? Now they, meaning the Mason, will criticize you for doing that. What will they criticize you? That Lamachad Inun Gaban. Tomorrow, God forbid, we're here temporary. At some point, you're going to come to us. And now now you torment us. In other words, tormenting means it's disrespectful to stand on their graves. It's a loyeg larash. So Rabbi articulated, don't do that. Now, that's based on the premise that they know that someone was stepping on top of the grave. So that's going to be the topic over here in the Yerushalmi. So Amalei said, Rabbi Yonason tells him about v'chachmin inon klum. Chachman doesn't mean here, do they have wisdom? Do they know? Are they aware? Are they aware of what's happening? And how can you say that? I have a pasuk that will show you otherwise. Loi kain ksiv. Is it not written, a pasuk in Koheles, that what? That, now let me just read you the beginning of that pasuk. The pasuk begins, Ki hachayim yoidim shiyamusu, that the living know that they will die. And then the pasuk continues, V'hamesim einam yoidim uma, the dead know nothing. So he read, V'hamesim einam yoidim uma. L'choira, what does that mean? It means they don't know of what's happening over here. So if they don't know what's happening over here, they're not going to criticize me. And by the way, he was not saying that if it's not for a burial, you should stop walk on their graves. He agrees to that. He's not saying that one can relieve himself. It's not respectful. It's not respectful. But here there was a purpose. Here you're going to make a burial. Here that was the way to get there. What are they? It would only not be allowed if they would be aware. It's like, just because you're burying a person doesn't give me the right to walk over the heads of living people. But if it's not disrespectful because we're burying, and if they're not aware, it should not be a problem. So Amalei, so he really strongly criticized this Chaver, Rabbi Yonason. And that's a very important lesson. And that is context. And he's going to tell him, you know how to read, meaning you know how to teach, but you don't know how to darshan a pasuk. If you would look at the Reisha that we just quoted, that the living know that they're going to die, you will automatically understand that this pasuk doesn't mean what you think it means. Let's read it inside. Amalei tells him, you know how to read. But litresh ein ato yodeya, you don't know how to expound, you don't know how to really darshan a pasuk. Why is that? Because the pasuk begins with the words ki achayim yodim shiyamus. Now, can that line mean literally no? Why? Because I don't need Shlomo HaMelech to come and tell us that the living will know that they will die. Everyone knows that they're going to die. He's meaning something else. For it not to be superfluous, it must mean something else. And that something else will be the same something else of the Sefer. What does the ratio of the pasuk means? The Chayim refers to the tzaddik. Elo wa tzaddik. Shafilu b'misasim kodoim Chayim. That's what they call living. They're living because they're living even after they passed away. Now, what's the point over here? Not that they live, that the tzaddikim know what's happening. Living means that they live a life based on the knowledge that they're going to pass away. Whereas when people sin, why are they sinning? Because at that moment they forgot that they're going to stand in front of God one day. The Chaim, while they are alive, Chaim is the word of tzaddik. The Chaim, while they are alive, they live a life in where they put the day of death in front of them. The Hamesim, meaning the Rishoyim, they don't know anything because they live a lifestyle making believe as if they're never going to die. Doesn't mean that after they die they're not aware. Doesn't mean that. The Hamesim in Yerushalmi means Ela Rishoyim. Why are Rishoyim called Mesim? Shafila b'chayim kuroyim Mesim. So therefore, nothing to do with what Mesim are or not aware. Actually, Mesim are very much aware of what's happening. But as we'll see in a moment, there's a big difference between that which is happening by their grave, which is why we go to the Beis HaChayim, versus what's happening in the world. We'll see what's happening in the world. Lav dafka, they know. Actually, the greater the tzaddik, God will make sure that they'll know. But what happens around their grave, they all know. Doesn't make a difference. Actually, at Kabbalah, we know that we have nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. The nefesh stays with the body. The nefesh stays with the body, with the physical body. So there's a certain part of the soul that's there. And that nefesh is connected to the ruach, that's connected to their neshama. So therefore they are aware, which is why we go to a Beis HaChaim to begin with. And we daven and we ask of them things. It works. No matter what kind of person. Excuse me? No, not at all. We're not saying that at all. We're saying that this pasuk has nothing to do with after death. This pasuk is speaking about while they're alive. After death, they are aware. Now, it makes sense. It's disrespect, especially now that don't do anything that they can do. We're not allowed to eat. I know many people. I know by tzaddikim is different. Let's not speak about tzaddikim. Many people think they're going to go to a Beis HaChayim for a yortzeit. They'll make a l'chaim. Not allowed to do that. No, we can't do anything. That's the Gemara. That's the halach. You can't do anything in a cemetery that the Mason can't do. The question is, how can you daven? Because you're going there. You're going there. We're not supposed to talk. We're going to daven. We're going to daven for them, and we're going to ask them for things. We're going to send them whatever. Let's go back. And also, by the way, you can't compare defecating or urinating. That's the most disrespectful thing. Even more disrespectful than you. Let's go back. But now, how do you know that the Rishonim feel like you're Mason? Because it says now, pasuk in Yecheskel, kiloi echboitz b'mois hameis. Now, hold on. What do you mean? God doesn't want for the mace to die. The mess already died. What? V'chi hameis meis? It must mean God doesn't want for a living person who's already called dead. God doesn't want for him to die. God wants him to do tshuva. And God doesn't want for that person to die. He wants him to do tshuva. Now, this is actually a pasuk in Zaisa Bracha, as it says, and the word lemor means to repeat to others, right? To share with others. Who exactly who exactly is Moshe Rabbeinu supposed to repeat? Doesn't fit over here. So Amalai, actually, God told Moshe Rabbeinu, I want you to tell something to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that now that you're passing away, Lech ve'emor la'avos, go tell our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that kol mashe isnesi lochem, that everything that I stipulated to the forefathers, asisi levnechem, that God saved us from Mitzrayim and all the nisim and the wonders, and we went out with a chush gadol, gavaldik. In other words, now hold on, it's like almost a paradox here. So we're saying that the word lemid is Moshe Rabbeinu should tell them, but did we not say that they are aware? Like, why should Moshe Rabbeinu B'chal have to tell to them? So the Pnei Moshe approaches it like this: 14 lines from the top of the Amid, that they knew already. But even when you know something, it's good news. Whoever tells it to you, you're grateful. You want to hear the good news again. That's Kavaldik. Point is, Alma, we see the Yodin. We see that they know. Now what's that? And if they know, it means that they are alive. Another definition over here. That's what the Pnei Moshe explains, which is quite amazing. Okay. Now, just like when we learned Bavli, same with the Yerushalmi, on the superficial level, there will be times that the Gemara is going to quote many dinim together that are perhaps, at least not externally connected one with the other. The reason why many laws are quoted together because they are all being said by the same person. Here we're going to have various statements from Rabbi Idi, B'Shem Rab Shimon, B'Shem Rab Yochanan, as we began over here. And ultimately, what are we getting to? We're getting to what is the status of a tefillah that was done while a person needed to relieve oneself, all behemshech to the connection, that tefillah you have to take off. But for sure, these statements on a deeper level have to be connected one to the other. Let's begin with the first statement, the first din. The first din is a din called mukav gavil. The word mukav gavil means that when you write letters in a Sefer Torah or in tefillin or in a mezuzah, they have to be surrounded with gavil. They have to be surrounded with white parchment. Meaning, if two letters touch one the other, it invalidates it. With the consequences, which we're not going to get into right now. Big difference between Sefer Torah versus tefillin and mezuzah. Sefer Torah could be fixed, tefillin and mezuzah cannot be fixed. We're going to learn a Gemara now. We don't paskin like this Gemara. That's actually going to be relative to what we paskin like, very lenient. The Gemara will differentiate as to where are their letters connected. They won't always become invalid. If one mingled the letters, in other words, they're touching one the other. So says the Gemara, I want you to know that is tanoy tane kasher. There's no consistency. Some places we find in a Tana it's good. Lest you think it's a machlekes tanoim, which sometimes is the case, says Rabbi Idi, B'Shem Rab Shimon, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, that none of these brises argue with each other. Eloma, every case is different. Man demar means man do amar kasher. Why is speaking about mila maton? Now, if you can imagine, or if you're using a Gemara that has illustrations. If you have the letters, let's say nun and vav, if the letters nun and vav are connected in the bottom, which means that the letter nun was first written good. There was a moment when the whole letter was good. When you were writing the letter vav, all the way down to the bottom, it was good. It's already bigger than a yud before the place of connection. It's already bigger than a vav. Means when the letters connected, what happened? There was too much ink in the bottom of the vav, so the ink expanded and it went into the bottom of the nun. There, since there was a moment that each letter was kosher, now, even though they are connected, it doesn't invalidate it. The bottom's touched. And you don't even have to scrape it off. Says the Charedim. I'm going to read inside the Charedim 6 lines in the top. We're going to go with Shuvas Haramban. That's the way we'll be going. Yesh lefarish that im nidbeka ha'ois la'achar shenikvud atzuras. After each letter's form was completed, kigoyin shenitbeku beragleim ein dibuk is apostle and Rabbi Chaim ve'ein tzarich loy ligroid v'loy lahafid. Or if to separate it, you can say scrape. Don't do anything. Why? Because each letter prior to its connection was standing on its own. It's like you tell a couple who's going to get married, you have to. It's nice to be connected to each other, but you have to be a person. You can't lose. You can't not be a person without the other. That's going to be too heavy on the other. Oh, however, man demar pasel milamayla. So milamayla won't be just imagine the same the nun and the vav. The nun was written well, right? But if when you began to write the vav, when you go from the left to the right, that's the way we write the letter proper. You went too much to the right into the letter of the nun. You don't even have a vav yet. You only had the roof of the vav. You never had the letter vav. If you never had a letter lachatchila, then it's not okay. Somehow I'm always thinking about the connection that we're speaking about the living and the dead. The living is the living, the dead is the dead, and they can connect to each other without killing each other. Maybe. Okay. And now, and the Gemara gives the example of the nun and the vav. What words do we give? Like you have in the words artseinu or in the words tifarteinu. We're just looking at the last 2 letters of the word, which is the nun and the vav. Now, the Gemara now, so that is statement number 1. Now there is a nuance. What's the nuance? It asks the Gemara, what's going to happen with the word artsecha? We're focusing on the tzaddik and the line chav, right? Tzricha, the way we're going to charge tzricha means you have to look at it. It's questionable. Same thing, tifartecha, the tough and the line chav tzricha. What's the issue? Let me say it like this. When you write a line chav, a final chav, the line down should be double than the width of the roof, double. But as long as the roof is long enough, it won't look like a reish, even if it's not double, even if it's same. Why are we saying that if every letter is good by itself, then if it's connected, it doesn't matter? If you can just imagine or have a picture that tzaddik going into the line chav, where does it go into the line chav? Not on the bottom, it goes somewhere in the middle. But if you look above, if you would look above that connection, the line chav is not double as it lechatchila should be, but it might not look like a reish. And that's what you have to look at. If it doesn't look like a reish anymore, that means the line chav was good enough, b'di'evid. That's the point. Once every letter is good enough for itself, then it doesn't matter that it's connected. Okay. That's every yid, every Jew is connected to God. And now we connect to each other. Something like that. Right. Now, next teaching from the same Amoida. That Rabbi Idi, we're going to go again with the version. B'shem Rav Shimon, b'shem Rabbi Yonasan says that lo yamid adam b'makom gavoy v'yispalel. Don't daven physically in a high place. Actually, we go down. In certain shuls in the old, they would actually make an indentation in the ground in order from where to daven. My time, what's the source? Amar Abba Abba, b'reged Rav Papi, and mimamakim karasich Hashem. Humble yourself. The connection is in the bottom. No, you see, the connection in the bottom is good. Let's figure this out. Let's go back. Now, the simple is now. The simple hemshich is from this. Amar Rab Idi, b'shem Rab Shimon, b'shem Rabbi Yonasan, lo yamadanu v'yispalel b'tzarach l'kavah. When a person has the need to relieve oneself, you're not even allowed to daven. And what's the source for that? Because it says in Amos, Hikoin l'kras alakecha Yisrael, prepare to meet God. Prepare to meet your God. By the way, we use this pasuk also as a source to put in a gartel, to prepare begashmias, to put in a beged. Preparing means don't daven to God when you have to relieve yourself. Now there is a huge difference. Again, the Yerushalmi is very kitzurdik, is very kitzurdik. Oh no, let's go weiter. And similarly, he's not the only one that said that. But Amar Rabbi Alexandri, when it says when we have a pasuk in Koheles, Shmor raglocha kasher telech al beis Elokim, guard your leg when you go to the house of God. Going to the house of God means going to shul to daven. That's why we go to shul. So what it means, Shmor raglocha means Shmor atzmacha min atipin hayotzim ben aglech. Make sure from that which goes from between your legs. In other words, be cognitive of whether you need to relieve yourself or not, and don't daven while you need to. However, says the Gemara, Hadad the Tamar B'dakin, all of the above is only when it comes to urinating. That is more serious. Avol Bigasin. But if a person has to defecate, then in Yachal Lisbol Yisbol. If they are able to restrain themselves, then they are allowed to daven. Now, again, the Yerushalmi, like here, is very bekitzadik. We learned this in the Bavli. There they added the nuance. Like, how do you define that? So it says like this, that if you can contain the gasim, the gedolim, for the time that it takes you to walk a parsa, 4 mil, let's say it's 72 minutes, then you can daven. If not, okay. Zog the Gemara, turning to Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, Vaiter Rabbi Yaakov, no, a different. Now that we quoted the pasuk of Koheles, now we're going to interpret the pasuk a different way. That Rabbi Yaakov, here it's Bar Abaya or it's Bar Abba, B'Shem Rabbi Acha, says that I'll tell you something else that this pasuk means. Shmoi raglocha, kasher telech al beis Elokim, guard your leg, b'loshen yachid. When you're going to the house of God, it means like this: Shmoi atzmacha, guard yourself. Kishetei nikral beis Elokim. There's going to be a day that we're going to be called to come to the house of God, which is the day of our passing, and may guard it. Meaning, make sure shetei tor v'naki. Make sure that you are pure and clean on that day. And similarly, Amar Abada, when it says in Mishlei, Yehei mekoir chabaruch, may your source be blessed. So you have this drush that instead of reading your source, you read mekoir acha, which means may your summons to to the grave be blessed. What does it mean? May it be blessed that when you're summoned to the grave, it should be a bracha. We should be able to stand in front of God in a blessed way. And the final teaching, when it says in Koheles that there's a time there's a time to be born, the Eis Lamas, and there's a time to die. And why do we need to have the big great wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech to tell us that? Don't we all know that there's a time to be born, a time to die? It means Ashtei Adam, fortunate is the man Sheshas Misasai, that at the moment of death, that person is Keshas Leidasai, meaning Ma'ashas Leidasai Naki. Person is completely clean of sin. Kach b'shas misasai, a person should be clean as well. Moving on to halacha daled. So Perek Beis, halacha daled. That's the way people always refer to Yerushalmi, because since up until recently there wasn't a consistent sort of sadaf, which I really believe we will have now. Perek Beis, halacha daled, like we mentioned in the intro, speaking about 4 dinim. But the 4 dinim have in it 2 machloikesin, and the first 2 will be subject to a machloikes tanoim, and the latter 2 will be just a simple statement. So let's go to the first 2. Says the Mishnah: Hakodesh Shema v'lo yishmi'a lo oznoi. A person read the Shema, but it was in such an undertone that the reader himself did not hear what he's reading. Or in modern words, you were davening on an airplane, even if you daven in the same tone as you were to daven in a shul, because of the outer noise, you won't hear. To daven much louder to hear what you're saying. Question is, b'di'evid, okay or not okay? What does it depend on? We'll see in a moment in the Pnei Moshe. We're going to learn the Pnei Moshe continuously throughout this mission. Keep your finger there. So the Tanakama says, Yatsa, b'di'evid, you're good. Yosi says, lo Yatsa. What's the machlokes? Why would he say that even with the Yevad Yoitze? Says the Pnei Moshe, Bishum Dechsev Shema. So Rabbi Yosi interprets the word Shema means Hashma lo asnecha mashat oimoitze b'pich. The word Shema also means to understand. In Chassidus, to be misboinen. To be misboinen, the concept of Havayah, like Keinu Havayah. Here, the nigla is listen, hear what you're saying. So if the Torah is telling you listen, you have to be able to listen, and if not, you're not yoytze. What about the Tanakam? Says that Pnei Moshe, that the Tanakama holds that the word Shema is telling you something different. Shema means understand. Understand means we don't care in what language you say the Shema. We are obligated midairaisa we noch paskin to say the Shema. V'shach b'chov kumecha. Do you have to say it b'lashon hakodesh? There are certain things that have to be said b'lashon hakodesh. Certain things can be said in any language. It's always better to say it in the holy tongue. But can you say, so the Tanakama learns that the word Shema is telling you, b'chol lashon she'ata shemeya, as long as you understand it. Say it in English, say it in Portuguese. But Rabbi Yossi says, no, Shema is telling you something else. That's the machlokes, the first machlokes in the Mishnah. Keep your finger in the Pnei Moshe because we're not done yet. Next topic in the Mishnah. If a person read the Shema, they heard what they're saying, but they were not meticulous in the pronunciation or in the enunciation of its letters. For example, says the Pnei Moshe, look inside, yafa. Where do we have to have that caution? There are many words that 2 words are back to back, one with the other. The ending of word 1 is the same letter that begins with word number 2. And if you don't make an emphasis to stop yourself, to make a little pause, then the same lamed from one will be the same lamed for the other. What's very interesting is he gives an example of Esev b'sadecha. Why is that very interesting? Because even we today, Ashkenazim, who don't pronounce all the letters correctly yet, we do differentiate between a beis and a vase. So if you're saying Esev the way it should be, Esev b'sadecha, but if you're going to say Esev, or if you're going to begin v'sadecha, then one can go into the other. Again, we mentioned in the intro that's the whole tizkiru. Tizkiru with a zayin means to remember. Tizkiru with a sin means in order to get reward. And we're not going to be telling God how proud we are that we're doing the mitzvahs to get reward. We're not going to say that, even if that's what's in our heart, because we're not yet. And it's okay. But nevertheless, that's not what those words mean. So what happens if you were not the dagdik? B'di'evid. Again, machlokes in the Mishnah. Between who? Rabbi Yossi says Yatza, you fulfilled your obligation. Okay, even Rabbi Yossi Lachatchila is not saying you should do so, but b'di'evid you're good. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Yatza, Lo Yatza. The Torah says you got to read the Shema. Reading it means reading it. It was not Rabbi Yehuda, but you're onto something. Now the next two dinim of the Mishnah, and here there's no machlokes in the Mishnah. Din number 3, Hakoyda L'Mafreya. What's very important about Hakoyda L'Mafreya does not mean that you read by Yomer V'Hoya Shema. It doesn't mean that you put out of order the 3 portions. That's not what it means. It means that in a parsha itself, you read the verses out of order. That's much worse. Don't forget that in the Torah, the 3 parshas are not written together. Even though we learned the Mishnah. Why did Chazal order it? Kabbalah Samal Shamayim, Kabbalah Sal Mitzvahs, and Tzitzis is only noig by Yom, not by Laila. There's a reason for there's a logic to this insanity, as they say. God forbid, there's a seder. Aber it's only lachatchila. The Mishnah here is speaking about that in the parsha itself, you mamish went backwards. That's what the Bnei Moshe wants to emphasize. Higdim pasuk shlishi l'sheni v'sheni l'rishon. Then the Mishnah says lo yatsa. You did not discharge your obligation. Again, there's no machlokes about it. Final case of the Mishnah. Kara v'ta'a. What's the ta'a? Ta'a means not that you went backwards. You skipped. You skipped the word. You skipped the verse. That's the skipping, not backwards. Says the Mishnah. Yachzer l'makim sheta'a. Go back to where you made a mistake from. Now, what about in this third case? In other words, do we say Yachzor l'makim shutah? It's an interesting lashon in the Mishnah. Like, what was the third case of the Mishnah? That a person was saying Shema Baruch Shem. Good. Then you say V'yahavta, and then you said the third pasuk, and then you said V'shinamtam, and then you said Uchsaftam Ukshartam. You went opposite. So when the Mishnah says Lo Yatza, what do you need to do now? That's the question. It's but if the din would have simply been whatever you said in the right order is good, and all you need to do is to go back. So the Mishnah should have said it. Mishnah doesn't say it there, but let's leave that for later. We're going to open up. The Gemara was going to open up what appears, and what I'm saying now is wrong. It's going to be corrected. But what appears to be a statement regarding the first 2 topics of the Mishnah. So let's quickly chazal. The first topic of the Mishnah was Hakoida and Shema v'lo yishmiya lo azna. You didn't hear. Machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Second case of the Mishnah was loy digdig ba'osi yoisel. You did not properly enunciate separating these words. And in our Siddur Tilas Hashem, there's always a line. Whenever there's 2 words that you have to stop between one and the other, there's a little line over there. You should, but if you didn't, Machlokes Rabbi Yossi is lenient, and Rabbi Yehuda is mach. Right, Rabbi Yossi is not consistently lenient. In the Reisha, Rabbi Yossi is the mach. So listen to what it appears like. Says the Gemara, Rav Amar, halacha k'divrei shneim lo. Halacha k'divrei shneim lo sounds that he was addressing the first 2 arguments of the Mishnah, which are the only 2 arguments of the Mishnah. And I was saying that in both of these machlokes, we're going to lean on the one who was more lenient. Now, if you remember in Eruv and Daf Mem Vav, there were certain klali hashas. Remember that? That was fascinating. Like when you have arguments between different, like Yachad v'Rabim, Halachic Rabim. You have Rabbi Yossi and anyone. We passing like Rabbi Yossi, Nemuka Imai. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. We passing like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir, because of him, everyone acknowledged that Rabbi Meir was so deep. No one got to the depth of what he was saying. So you would think, so everyone would follow him. No, since they didn't understand the logic, they didn't rule like him. There's a whole series of who do we follow? And based on that, the Gemara is going to want to understand why did we even need the Rav to make that statement when it's self-understood. Asks the Gemara, the word here is di lochein. Di lochein means, it's hard to translate it. And if Rav wouldn't have said it, ve'im loy kain, like why did I need him to say it, even if he wouldn't have said it? What do you think we would have said? Asks the Gemara. Man kain omnin. Like what other option is there? First machlekes is between Tanakama is also called stam. Why didn't Rebbe write a name to the first opinion in the Mishnah? Right? because it wasn't just one; it was the consensus. It's almost like Yachid v'Rabbi. It's called Stam and Rabbi Yosi. Stam and Rabbi Yosi, you're passing like Stam. Rabbi Yosi is the Mahmud. I get it. Rabbi Yosi says no. Hashma lo aznach hamasher etzem Stam and Rabbi Yosi. So the rule is halachic is Stam. We know that. In other words, without the Rav, we anyways would have passed it like the Tanakam. Furthermore, in the next argument in the Mishnah, it's between Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda. And the rule is, like we quoted from Eruvin, that Rabbi Yosi is the Mukayimai. Halachic Rabbi Yosi. And therefore, the question, so good. We're not saying that Rav is saying something wrong. We're saying, the Gemara is asking, Rav is saying something that's not necessary. Why do we need to have Rav clarifies the Gemara something Gavaldi? That when we read the words in the Gemara, that Rav says, we thought he's speaking about both arguments. Vlad, you can't hear?
Now we can.
Now we can hear. I'm sorry. That's funny.
Cut off for a second.
Sorry. Rav did not mean both arguments. The first argument in the Mishnah, whether you have to be the Yevid here or not, that we paskin leniently kistam. Rav was not even referring to that because, like the Gemara says, stama but Rabbi Yosi halacha kistama without Rav. The second argument in the Mishnah that we had in our Mishnah, it's between whom and whom. Rabbi Yosi is lenient yatsa. Rabbi Yehuda says lo yatsa. There were other girsas in the Mishnah. There were two versions in the Mishnah. Now, Ella begin the Shema the Tanila. Since Rav heard that others learned who are the authors of the argument in the second clause in the Mishnah, and he heard it written in a Braisa of Rav Chia in the name of Rav Meir, not Rabbi Yosi, not Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yehuda. Rab Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, everything changes. Guys, Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda, who do we paskin like? Nemuka Imai, Rabbi Yosi. If it's between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who do we paskin like David? A rule, who do we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda? If that would have been the version, and based on that version, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that if you did not properly enunciate all of the letters, even b'di'evet lo yatsa, without Rav, one might have thought that we'll paskin according to that version, we'll paskin like lo yatsa. You got it? Gavaldi. So what did Rav say? Well, Fum King, so what are the words of Rav, guys? Rav says, Halacha kedivrei shneyem. Those words mean, now in the correct understanding, no matter who said what. I know there are two versions. Forget about who said what. The lenient one. Yotza. How great is that? Works out.
So shneyem means either Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yosi, whoever you attributed to.
That's it. Whoever is the author of the lenient opinion in the second clause of the Mishnah, that's in the Reisha he was never addressing. Beautiful. Now, let's go to the first case of the Mishnah. So the first case of the Mishnah spoke about you read the Shema and you didn't hear what you're reading. You said the words. You're like in an airplane today. You know, I put on Bose noise cancel just to know good cloud, not plugged in stam, and then when you read, you hear every word you're reading. For years I do it. I like the noise canceling, but I realized then that if you don't do that, it's hard to hear what you're saying unless you daven very loud, which is gesund to hate. You have to hear. Huh? Oh, so the Mishnah spoke about the Shema. And what's the source of the machlokes that we learned to Pnei Moshe? Whether Shema means Hashma lo atzla or whether Shema means B'chol Loshen Sha'ata Shemeya. So all of that is based on the pasuk Shema. So now the question is, what about davening? That's the kasha. That's not discussed in the Mishnah. And the logic of the Mishnah, the source of the Mishnah is from the word Shema. Shema is only for the Shema. No, Rabbi Chaim is saying maybe it means loud enough. Had you been in a normal room, no, Shema means Shema. Listen. When you speak to your child, do you want them to hear you, or do you want them to hear you if there wouldn't have been chaos in the room? The only difference is instead of you talking to someone else, you're talking to yourself. You're talking to yourself. Shema is you're talking to yourself. And the mitzvah on the talking, the mitzvah is on the listening. But for you to listen, you have to do the talking. Let's hop another few lines. So it says the Gemara Tani, we learned in the Braisa. What about now?
The question is, according to that opinion, that says that you have to hear yourself when you say Shema, does it apply also to davening? That's what
exactly. Very good. We'll read that in the Pnei Moshe. Now the Gemara says, If you davened and you didn't hear what you're saying, now hold on, guys. The Gemara is interrupting the Braisa. This whole Braisa is needed according to whom? This is only needed according to Rabbi Yossi. No, it's if you're going to go that even by the Shema, you don't have to hear. Then there would be no doubt that davening you also don't need to hear. Why would there be no doubt? Let me just add, we learned to Sugya and Brachas because when Chana davened, Chana didn't hear what she was saying. Chana's lips were moving and no sound was coming out. Fakert. That's what I think. That's why. But I think by Sfardim it's that way. I know Al Pikabalu and Mashiach will come will be that way. That the halacha will change regarding. Do you have to hear what you're davening at some point? Even according to us now, we agree that in the future you won't need to do that. There's a zoyer about it, but the Gemara is clarifying this discussion of the Braisa is dafke according to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds that Shema you have to hear. Rabbi Yossi says if you didn't hear the Shema, even b'di'evet, you're not yoytze. So now the question is, what about Shemaina Esrei? What about Shemaina Esrei? Hayidain. 1 second. According to Rabbi Yossi, what Rabbi Yossi? Hayidain Rabbi Yossi, our Rabbi Yossi. Hadod the Tanina. That which we learned in our Mishnah. Hakodesh Shema v'lishmi lo aznoi lo yatzam. A yatza the Tanakama. But Rabbi Yossi says lo yatzam. So that is what the Braisa is saying. Now, what does the Braisa say? What's the bottom line? I mean, the Braisa is not asking. The Braisa is saying the spalal. I'm sorry. The Braisa made a statement. The spalal v'lishmi lo aznoi says the Braisa. Yatzam. Yatza, look inside the Pnei Moshe. We'll finish up Pnei Moshe today. 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. In other words, see this feet lay, loy, the masnis. The bekriyashma after the Evan Yatza. For that, we need to have a Braisa Komash Malon. The betfila, even Rabbi Yossi is like that. The b'diavad, the like siv Yatza. Why? Because the like siv ba Shema. Beautiful. Chai is to be continued.
Travis, thank you.
Gewaldig. Gewaldig. You know, the Pnei Moshe was good by saying that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even need to notify Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They knew it already. He wanted them to hear it also from him.